What a difference. It's amazing how a little soap and water can completely change the look of a car covered with dirt, grease, and road contamination. Now, if you work with chemicals, you'll want to know about a process like the one we've seen here at the car wash. It's a way to make sure that hazardous chemicals and their residues are completely removed from where they may have accumulated on personnel and equipment. It's also a way to keep contaminants within a set area and keep them from spreading. The process is called decontamination, and it can be critical to health and safety at hazardous waste sites. Wherever there is contamination, there must be decontamination. Chemical contamination of people and equipment happens most often during emergencies or cleanup situations. Building 13 has been shut down. It was the scene of a major spill. Before normal operations can continue, the area must be decontaminated, and so must all of the equipment and personnel involved. We call Building 13 a controlled cleanup site. Since the cleanup work here will be done over a period of days, an ongoing decon operation is set up. The idea is to minimize the spread of hazardous chemicals, to keep them from being carried away from the site on tools and clothing. Remember that decontamination is a process, and there are rules that must be followed in a set order. Your employer's written plan tells who should be deconned, how, when, and where. Decon can be as simple as removing and cleaning a pair of gloves. It could also mean a full-scale 18-step decon protocol for level A situations. Now, in a typical cleanup operation, the area is designated into zones. These zones are very important and serve as the basis for good decon procedures. In our example, Building 13 and the area around it has been laid out like this. The area where the spill cleanup is centered is the exclusion zone. The contamination reduction zone adjoins and is where deconning takes place. The support zone is located safely away from the contamination. We know through laboratory analysis and sampling what type of chemicals are in the building. From that, we can determine safe handling procedures and what protective equipment to wear. In addition, we can figure out the best way to decontaminate the people and equipment leaving the building. Workers in Building 13 are wearing Level C protective equipment. In Level C, the workers are adequately protected from the contaminants inside. This equipment consists of a hard hat, air purifying respirator, chemical resistant suit, inner and outer chemical resistant gloves, overboots, and safety shoes. Before we begin the decontamination process, let's see what contamination looks like. In most cases, contamination is there, but we might not be able to see it. What looks like a safe situation can be deceiving. Here's what a worker might look like if he was contaminated with a very visible substance, one composed of stearic acid, sodium lauryl sulfate, and triethanolamine. We know it better as shaving cream. Though his PPE has kept the contaminants from contacting him directly, he carries gross contaminants on his suit and tools. With this very graphic image of contamination, let's see what would happen if he did not go through the deconning. Though we know that the contaminant in our example is harmless shaving cream, what if it wasn't? What if it was a hazardous chemical capable of causing severe injury or illness? let's back up and see how we could have stopped the spread of the contamination to the worker and everything he touched. The way to stop the contamination from spreading is to decon. It begins with a tool drop. Contaminated equipment and hand-carried tools are segregated. Stations are separated to prevent cross-contamination. In our example, a sequence of washing and rinsing is appropriate to decon the contaminants from our worker. The decon activity is conducted in a specific sequence. The boots are deconned first. This is the principle that will be followed down the line. Washing and rinsing outer, more heavily contaminated items first. Manning the decon stations are assistants who must also wear protective clothing. The boot wash is followed by the boot rinse. The decon line is laid out on a plastic drop cloth, like this visqueen. This prevents contaminants from seeping into the soil. Without the drop cloth, the decon area would itself become a cleanup site. Outer gloves may also be heavily contaminated. A long-handled, soft-bristle brush helps wash and rinse off contaminants. Keep in mind that wash and rinse water used to decon may have to be classified as hazardous waste. Here, care is taken to minimize the generation of wastewater. The suit wash is the next step in the decon procedure. This children's wading pool makes an ideal collection container for wash and rinse water. It's large enough for the worker to stand in during the suit wash. Although a water wash and rinse is used in this example, other decon cases may use a neutralizing solution. Such neutralizers chemically transform a hazardous substance into less harmful waste. Disposable protective clothing is frequently used in cleanup situations like this. Though reusable suits are available, the decon process may require more exacting procedures in order to remove all traces of chemical residue. Once the gross contaminants have been removed from the protective clothing, the overboots, outer gloves, and suit can be disposed of. The duct tape that seals out contamination at the wrists and ankles is tabbed for easy removal. Though the assistant is available here to help in doffing the protective clothing, work practices like tabbing the duct tape are a good idea. The order in which the decon activities has taken place makes good sense. The most heavily contaminated items were washed and rinsed first. Now the protective clothing is removed in the same order. But it's not only protocol that's observed in a proper decon, it's procedure too. The outer gloves must come off without contaminating inner gloves or exposed skin. Glove removal is a precise activity that should be practiced. The convenience of disposables is obvious, but remember, spent protective clothing may become hazardous waste and should be treated as such. With only the respirator and inner gloves remaining, the worker can now complete the decon. The respirator is removed and stored separately. Respirators will be deconned and reconditioned before using again. The last step is the removal of inner gloves. At no time during cleanup or decon have the contaminants broken through to the skin. Once deconning has been completed, the worker enters the support zone. Workers who assist in the decon line must themselves be deconned before leaving the contamination reduction zone. Now the worker can go home, knowing that chemical contamination won't go with him. Since most contamination is invisible, it's still hard to know from visual observation if the deconning has been effective. But it's a pretty sure bet that the procedures used in a particular situation have been tested and are known to do the job. Your safety professionals are required to do extensive testing to establish and maintain a decon operation that prevents the spread of chemical contamination. Test methods like sampling and wipe testing are done periodically to make sure that the health and safety of people and the environment are protected. Now, in the example you've just seen, an ongoing decon operation was in effect. But deconning is a vital part of any situation where people and equipment may carry chemical contaminants from one place to another. Emergencies are another good example of when to decon. If a chemical gets out of control and an emergency response is called for, a decon line is set up at the scene of the emergency. Though the stations may be less involved, the basic principles still apply. Portable supplies and equipment are carried on emergency response vehicles for the purpose of deconning people and equipment. In special situations when a contaminated person is in urgent need of medical care, proper deconning may be postponed until the situation is stabilized. These medical emergencies may include heat stress, severe injury, or gross contamination that immediately threatens the health of the individual. Remember, wherever there is contamination, there must be decontamination. 50 years ago, the principles of deconning were not known to workers in many industries where hazardous materials were used. The harmful results of bringing contamination from the worksite into homes and among family members provide a lesson to remember. Now, we know how to handle chemicals safely, how to keep them contained, and how to keep hazardous wastes from harming our environment. Most important, we know how to take better care of ourselves and our families.